Welcome to today's episode of the Dynamic Church Podcast. I'm Bobby Gilstrap, and I'm glad you're joining us today. Our topic of discussion today is on why we left the SBC. Not me personally, but I have a pastor joining me who is one of many who in the last several years has decided to leave the Southern Baptist Convention due to a variety of things. But there's some things that kind of stood out as contributing factors that led to that. And so let me introduce to you right now. This is Steve Roe. Steve is the pastor of Riverwalk Community Church in Bay City, Michigan. Steve, we're glad to have you joining us.
I am glad to be with you. Thank you.
Well, Steve started at Riverwalk Community. It was Riverwalk Baptist Church, actually, at the time. And that was some 25 years ago. And he started as a bivocational pastor, or I guess we should say partially funded. He's now been a fully funded or full-time pastor now for some number of years now. And that's been a blessing for him to be able to do that. Fully funded because every pastor is full-time, I guess, whether they get fully funded or not, I guess, at that point. But I want you to tell us your story. You guys have left the Southern Baptist Convention, and there were a number of things that kind of led up to that. So I want you to be able to give us a little bit of your story and help us to understand a little bit about what happened doing that. So share with us today, if you will, what were some of the biggest factors that led to your church leaving the Southern Baptist Convention?
Well, thank you again for allowing me to be here. One of the biggest challenges we had was there was an accusation made against me. And so, of course, the church had to make a decision to at least investigate, which I totally supported. I took a 7-week leave, but little did I know that during that 7-week leave, there was an alternative plan really to take over the church. Full investigation, everything came back rock solid, clear, but the plan was already put in place to take over the church, and it didn't work. However, the state had other plans. Within a few weeks, the group that left the church already was planted as a new church start in Bay County, which in our city, there's already another Southern Baptist church besides myself at that time. So there was 2 of us already here. Don't know if there was necessarily a need for a third one, but nobody knew about it. Our director of missions at that time had no idea that was going on. There was another church plant just a little ways from us. Nobody knew about. And so that's a little frustrating. And still to this day, I never did hear from the state office. As we tried to work through and negotiate and communicate, no one talked to us. And so as a church that was left here, we just felt like co-oping with an organization that didn't want anything to do with trying to reconcile, we couldn't be part of.
Okay, let me try to clarify a little bit to help folks that are tuning in to get a better understanding. I know your area, but Southern Baptist and even evangelical churches are not saturating over your area. There are not lots of churches all over the place. And it's not necessarily that there couldn't be another good evangelistic church that's in the area reaching people, especially, as you're reaching niche groups and different kinds of groups in a community. I get all that, and all that's realistic. But if I hear you right, the sore point for you was you guys didn't know anything about this. Your associational missionary or director of missions was not informed that there was a new church starting. You weren't aware. The other pastors in the area or the region were not aware. Am I understanding that right? And if so,
you're absolutely correct. No one knew. I found out from one of my old parishioners that shared something on social media of this new church start. And I'm like, did you know there was a church going on? To our director of missions, she said, no, I hadn't heard anything. I had heard nothing about it. And so that led to some other discussion, like, well, what's really going on? Why isn't there co-oping at least communication with us as other churches? Because we were still, listen, I was a Southern Baptist guy. I'd been with the church, I've been with the church 25 years. That was 5 years ago. So 20 years I was sold. And not to communicate with us was really a disappointment.
Okay. So let's lay the groundwork for that real quick. What you found out later, obviously you're unaware of all this going on and all of a sudden it's happening. I'm assuming your associational missionary, director of missions, kind of went to bat on the church's behalf, trying to find out what's happening at that point.
Oh, absolutely. I still have a great relationship with him. I love him dearly. and he supported us through the whole thing. And he did a biblical thing. He tried to get reconciliation. He didn't want to lose us as a church. I mean, he saw the value of who we were as a body of people and felt like it was right to have conversations. So yeah, he had no idea what was going on.
Right. Okay. So he went to bat, started trying to figure out what's happening,
Absolutely.
what's going on. And so what did he and you discover had been going on behind the scenes then before you became aware of this?
Well, what we found is we have a camp in Michigan that had one of the state directors was actually the director of this camp. They had already named him the pastor of this new church start, and so it was kind of like that. Even made our
Who is they? Who is they had named him?
That church, or I would even say the state, because that church then was already started, and they had called this man as a pastor.
Okay, was there any connection at this point with the national, like the North American Mission Board or anything, any other groups within the Southern Baptist Convention?
Well, I would say that the North American Mission Board, if the money's coming through to do new church starts, that was a new church start. So that was, to me, that was part of something that really also resonated as like, wait a minute, you took 30 people from our congregation and called a new church start and throw money at it. And it just made no sense to me that was a right thing to do.
Okay. Hang on just a second though. Okay. You just said they took or left, you had left your congregation, 30 people that went to this new church start. Are they not reaching lost and unchurched people as a new church? Or did they primarily take, I guess we'll call it a core group or some type of a group from other existing churches?
They took from our church to start another church.
Oh, wow. Okay. And
this without having communication with us,
right,
without trying to reconcile, or our director of missions.
Yeah, right. Okay.
They already had a building before he even found out. How does that work? At the same time, they did it in another church start. And our community is not like in the South. There is not we're a pretty large area where we're at, the Bay Area region, and we cover part of the thumb of Michigan. Again, this is Michigan. This is the thumb. That's kind of how we can tell who we are.
Yeah.
And so we would cover that area, but there was no communication that, we started another church over there about the same time. So there was 2 works that were started without any knowledge. They just become, and it wasn't just about them not talking to us. It was about them not talking to the whole, nobody knew. And so that part was very discouraging. So we just couldn't stay part of something that really wasn't serious about helping the local church, in our opinion.
Right. And it sounds like there wasn't any communication at all. So then let me ask you this. Was there a single event, like was that the single event or issue that pushed you to make the decision to leave? Or were there other things that were a culmination of problems over time that maybe topped it off?
Well, we supported the co-op. So we supported, the mission outreach that we had. I would say that was probably the pinnacle that pushed it off, but we still would have been reconcilable if somebody would have sat down and talked to us and let's work through this. And I have forgiven everybody and resolved anger issues that I had. But when I look at the new fellowship that I'm with and do some comparison, it's really like night and day with their communication and openness with us as a church and pastors.
Yeah. So what are some of the other things then that had surfaced that were giving you concern? I mean, this obviously was a huge deal. And let me pause for a second. Have you guys been able to recover from all of that had taken place? And how long ago was that? And then have you recovered?
That was 5 years ago. And keep in mind, that was right in the midst of COVID. So as a church, we take a double gut punch with no support other than the folks that were left here. And we just rolled up our sleeves and kept our nose to the grind and felt like God wanted us to stay here. And we have come a long ways. I didn't have to go back to work. I still continue to get paid. Lord continues to bless us, and we have been well. But the whole, when I think about what we were when I first started, and I worked under a wonderful gentleman by the name of Tom Martin, who was our director of missions, who started this work. This was the first work he started when he come to this area. So I was passionate behind standing behind him in the Southern Baptist, and just that kind of dialogue, and not really be able to work together as a cooperative body really changed the dynamics of what I felt Southern Baptist stood for, because I didn't see a true cooperation anymore.
Yeah. What were the other things that had surfaced that were giving you pause as you came into
Well,
that?
let's go back to when I just said director of missions, Tom Martin. Well, they made this whole big change and they took away director of missions. We were no longer going to have a director of missions. And I was part of that decision-making process. I was a moderator at that time for our association, where we had made a decision. Listen, we still felt as 16 churches, we needed that kind of helper or organizer that could kind of be a support for us in communication with the state. And then the state could communicate with the North American Mission Board. That was going to be gone. We weren't going to have any. You're on your own, or, you know, we weren't going to have one. So we had made a decision as an association at that time. We hired our own. We hired a wonderful
Let's
gentleman.
pause just a second for those who aren't aware. You had to do that because what went away?
The North American Mission Board no longer supported the directors of missions, so they pulled all of our funding for that.
Okay. And at the time in Michigan, I don't remember the exact percentages, but the North American Mission Board, through cooperative program dollars that were given, Southern Baptist had an agreement. There was what we called a cooperative agreement at the time. And so the North American Mission Board pitched in basically 80 or 85%, I think maybe, of the salary and benefits, that kind of thing, for those associational missionaries as a field missionary. And the state convention then partnered with another 15%. And the local associational churches, they usually kicked in and provided additional benefits, maybe a different account, like for business expenses or whatever. They had various ways of doing that, different associations. So what happened was in 2011 into 2012, the North American Mission Board withdrew that. They stopped funding those associations. So bringing us up to speed where you were, your association then said, we need to hire somebody on our own, and we need to do that. I know for a fact in your area and other areas, in particularly in Michigan, churches changed what they were giving to the cooperative program to be able to give more money to the association to provide for associational support at that point, which is one of the things that was a consequence of that action of defunding. Let me pause just a second real fast. Let me throw this up here. Where is it? Here it is right here. Anyone who hasn't read, there is a book that Chuck Kelly, who's the retired president emeritus of New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, he wrote a book called The Best Intentions, How to Plan to Revitalize the SBC, Accelerated Its Decline. It is available. There's a link to it there in the video description. I'd encourage you to get that and look at that. It documents much of these funding issues that we're talking about. We're not going to get down into those now, but that gets us back up to speed. You hired this person to come as your director of missions. He's still there, actually, as your director of missions. And so you were not getting the support. North American Mission Board had withdrawn that support, again, not cooperative with the local association and local churches anymore. What other things contributed to your seeing a lack of cooperation?
That was a huge one.
Or other issues of concern?
Well, again, not everyone understands our area, but if we looked at the Bay Association, and the average attendance is probably 30. And when I took over the church, there was 12 people my first Sunday. And then we ended up being the second largest church in the association before we left. And most churches were really, really small. So you had typically just a pastor. You didn't have extra pastors. So it was really an important piece to have that director of missions, not only here to help the local churches, but then as the local churches would work together and do planning, okay, what other areas could we go into? How do we work together to maybe plan a church? That just seemed to all be not important anymore. And that's disappointing, and was certainly another factor to not wanting to be part of something that just the difference that I saw 25 years ago. And I know life changes. It just became so, I don't know what word to use, decentralized to the local church as much as the mothership running everything, and it should always be the local church that is driving. It just seemed like it reversed in there, and that didn't make sense. And I can tell you assuredly, the new organization that I'm with, not trying to promote it because I have never been about church hopping or stealing or anything, but their heartbeat is pastors, making sure their pastors are healthy, their wives are healthy, because that produces healthy churches. And they would never go into an area and plant a church without working. That's their whole goal, is to find other local churches to work with and then work together as a team to help plant a church, not just we're going to put a
real
church
partnership. Well, in my
in.
years
Real
of
partnership.
working with church
Probably what we
planting,
used to have. Probably what we used to have. And that's why
well,
I say
yeah,
we, because I still have the Southern Baptist blood in my veins. It's just like
yeah,
I say we a lot because it's still something I believe in, that cooperative program. I came from
right,
a fundamental independent background, right?
yeah,
So we were so fundamental independent that they didn't work together at all. So when I saw something that worked together, I was like, man, I really am impressed at how well this works together. So then
right. Well,
watching that kind of
in
unravel over my time is
in
certainly
all of
another
my
factor.
working with church planting over the years, and I've worked with a lot of them over the years, one of the first things that we would do to try to work with, of course, I was associational missionary or in a state convention, but one of the first things we would do is we would try to help uh, be catalytic in the sense of finding other churches, especially in a closer area, that could help partner, help support them with people, help support them with special events, help support them with outreach activities. I mean, there's all kinds of things that those partners can do. And this is, you use the term, I think it's a great way of putting it and framing it, but the centralization of power, no longer being cooperative. And I don't want to harp on it too much, but again, this book by Chuck Kelly, that's one of the arguments he makes in this book of how the North American Mission Board under Kevin Ezell, after the Great Commission resurgence, started centralizing power, wanting everything to
Mm,
be coming out of the North American Mission Board. And even though they always say churches plant churches, it was always coming back to them, and they were not empowering, especially that mid to small size church. If you were in a
right.
mega size church, then you didn't really have that kind of power per se as such at that point. Now, let's jump ahead. Your church begins to look at the possibility of leaving the convention, Southern Baptist Convention. All these things have happened. So tell us, how did your leadership and members respond when this decision started being discussed?
They're the ones that came to me first. Honestly, it was
Okay.
the membership coming to me saying, why do we want to stay with an organization that they won't even come talk to us? Why would we want to be part of something that is so disrespectful to us? Listen, if they wanted to be mad at the pastor, okay, be mad at the pastor, but you still had 45 people here. You didn't care about the 45 people here to come and have a conversation with them. So they're the ones that really helped me decide through prayer that it was time to do something else. And we weren't sure what we were going to do. We looked at several different organizations as we prayed about it. But I felt like we needed to be connected to a tribe, because what I'd been through, I just felt like it was important to be connected with somebody.
Yeah, well, and we should be walking with each other. There's no question about that. Uh, were there concerns of your people, as you say, they were raising this issue? Was it only this issue about the church basically splitting, them drawing people, or were there other things that were coming to light that they were concerned about as well?
For the most part, I don't know if the general body of churches really look that deep into what's happening. We had our co-op that we talked about. We supported missionaries. We would have, the missionary conferences that would come into the area. I think it was every 3 years at that point. So that gives them some context to it, and they were okay with that. But and so I don't know if they saw a lot of the political stuff that was going on outside of the framework of what we were dealing with at the local level. I don't know if they really had their ears to the grind to hear what was happening. Um, at different times, I would have people come to me about the seminaries, stuff that they'd heard, but I knew that came out, I think, the 70s at that point, some stuff that they were a little uncomfortable with. And they just wondered where things were really going and what direction were we. There was some discussion. Are we becoming, and I'm saying we, Southern Baptists at that
Right.
point, are we becoming too liberal with some of the stuff that they're starting to slide out? And there was some discussion at different times about, where does all the money go, but not really like, it wasn't a big dagger in their heart thing. The dagger in their heart thing was watching them at a local level being destroyed, in their opinion, being disrespected, and not felt like there was any value to them at all.
Well, let me ask you this. You already mentioned the seminaries there, but what concerns did you have about the financial transparency in the SBC? I know from the North American Mission Board that was a concern, as it continues to be, but the seminaries as well.
Well, again, as I started to peel back some onion stuff and seeing that, when I started seeing a little bit of what people were making, that became a little bit of a eyebrow to me. And as I started, even in our own state, we had a beautiful building that we'd already had paid for, new, and then they sold it and went somewhere else. I didn't understand that either. Why did we do that? So there was certainly some things that started to make me feel a little uncomfortable. As far as, again, the teaching that happens at the seminaries, I was just very cautious of what happened before and how quickly in seminaries even liberalism can come in and create some ugly disagreements with me and what the scriptures say.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you have concerns about the way finances were being handled, mission offerings, especially after all the what appeared to be a debacle from the field side, with the way the North American Mission Board handled defunding missionaries, not only associational missionaries, but community missionaries and lots of other categories of missionary that Southern Baptists were funding? The North American Mission Board basically threw those out the door and said, we're only going to fund church planting catalysts and church planters as the only two categories. They've now expanded a little bit with some evangelism, but very few other areas. Did those kind of things concern you as far as that kind of lack of transparency? And then I want you to go from that into talking about what do you see now in the organization you're in now after leaving Southern Baptist that helps you to reflect back on the difference in transparency?
Well, again, when you have 40-some thousand churches that are giving funding and the millions and millions of dollars that were going in, for me, it was one of trust. I felt like, okay, I'm going to trust people that are in these leadership roles, that they're doing the right thing. So once I had one splinter per se that kind of showed me that there was something else, then I looked at other things and went, man, there's just something really wrong at the top. There's something going on with this money. And like you had mentioned already, mega churches that are making decisions for all of us that maybe we don't all agree with. But again, I felt like we really didn't have a voice in those things. Now, if I talk about where we're at now, we were the organization called Converge, and we get I can call. Now, we're not nearly as big, right? So, but I can call or email the president, and I will get a response from the president. I can tell you that in our area, each year we are audited by an organization called ECFA, and it does an annual check on our finances, our church, where we're at, what's happening in our area. And we as churches can ask for that information, and they will share the information. They don't want us to feel at all that there's any question of where funding goes through. And that's one of the things I kept saying is we just voted on a new president this year, and they had a wonderful man for years. And I said, if we keep growing like we're growing, please, please, please don't hide what we're doing. Don't become, have hidden agendas. It has to stay open for everybody to see what we're doing and how we're reaching lost people. And they are passionate about helping pastors and making sure the pastors are healthy. That creates healthy churches so we can build churches that are reaching to lost people around the world.
Yeah, and that's also important. And if you ask specifically how church planting dollars, let's say, are being spent, and how they're investing that money and where it's going, and how much planters are receiving as far as a stipend or support or whatever, are they forthcoming with that kind of information?
100%. they have a plan put in place where, ideally they will have, let's say Steve Roe felt like he was led to start a church, and there was a group, and he had some groups that were working, and they're looking at him. Well, you're not just, okay, we like what we see here. It is they try to hook you up with the local church, along with the coach, along with someone at the regional level. They're all working together, and then they're reviewing that, and they're watching, and how are you responding, and are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Because they're not going to support something that you're not diligently working at. And so it's accountable to all of us. So we're in the loop on any of that stuff that's going on. If we ask for it, they will absolutely share it without any reservation, because they have nothing to hide. So they want us to be part of what's going on.
Well, when you ask other tough questions about things within the organization, whether it be church planting or something else, missions or something else, how do they respond?
Immediately. I mean, I will get, the thing is,
you don't get the runaround. I mean, you're not sent off to 14 other places.
Listen, because I knew we were going to have this conversation. I wanted to understand fully what we did. I sent out a Facebook message to our regional man. He said, I'll call you at 3:00. At 3:00, after I sent him the message early in the morning, 10 o'clock, we had a great conversation and went over. Steve, if you need any more information, you let me know. Because I didn't know how we were audited. I mean, I knew we get information. So he told me, this is what happens. And you can go onto their website. You can even go on the website, put us in, and you can see exactly what has happened for Converge Mid-America. You can see it. It's not hidden. There's nothing. They don't hide anything. It is. And again, if you need anything else, even after the call, Steve, let me know, because I'm here to help you and support you in any way I can to make sure you fully engage and understand what's happening at Converge. I don't feel that anything's hidden from them at all, from us.
So you feel very, very transparent then.
100% transparent. And they are on everything that we're doing. They want pastors to be engaged and involved, and they engage us in prayer conferences where we can be talking to someone in the Caribbean as we're praying together and working together for a cause. Well, because they've had a great work in the Caribbean.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's good you can keep up with what's going on like that. That's a great opportunity for a local church. And it's always hard for local churches to actually put a face on missions a lot of times when you're trying to work cooperatively, because you can't see what every missionary is doing, that kind of thing at all. Well, you keep up still with a lot of what's happening with Southern Baptists. As you mentioned, you still have a heart for Southern Baptists without any doubt. So let me ask you this. Do you believe the SBC's current trajectory can be reversed, or do you think it's gone too far?
I've thought about it a lot, because there's things that still desperately break my heart, because I know Tom Martin loved this church. And he started as a great guy. Yeah, he started as the Southern Baptist Church. And so when I prayed about it, not that I'm praying to Tom Martin, but I really was like, what would he do? And as much as he loves Southern Baptists, he also had an incredible character and integrity. He would have made the same decision. We pray as a Converge brothers. I share with them, hey, listen, guys, we got to pray for my Southern Baptist brothers. I don't know. I feel like there's a divisiveness within the whole Southern Baptist that almost needs to be broken down and restarted over in some areas, because it seems like, I hate to talk politics, but it seems so political at this particular point. It's like you got this side against this side, just like we do in the media, and you can't find common ground to work together. And there's some agendas on there it seems like people can't find out about. And then when you're hearing millions of dollars being spent on houses, or you're seeing millions of dollars being spent on someone's salary or a book writing, you scratch your head when you think, how many thousands of people could we reach locally with that type of money? And we're not doing it. So I feel like God's never done, right? He's always at work around us and wants us to get involved, but something desperately needs to change with the SBC at the rate they're going, because right now I don't see them planning churches the way they should be. Just because and I don't even like the restarts. That's just my opinion. Okay, we're going to close a church for 90 days and then we're going to dump money into it and call it a new work. It's just like, okay, I'm just not sure if that's right either. That's just an opinion of mine. It's what are we really trying to do? Because there was a time when I looked at Southern Baptist history, we were the ones that were leading people to Christ. We were the
Oh, absolutely.
evangelical force that radically was changing things. Let's look at Michigan. It wasn't touched. So what the Southern Baptists say, we got to go up to Michigan and we got to go in there and make a handprint. Well, we came up and we made a fingerprint at this point, and it's quickly fading. And unless there's some real change, and I know there's some changes at our state level that might help them, but right now, I don't see a real move in the right direction. Just my opinion.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned about the church planting. I mean, we're planting about half the number of churches we were before the Great Commission resurgence, and we're spending 3, 4, 5 times the amount of money per church plant if you break it
Mm,
down of what
mm,
we were spending before, and that's adjusted for inflation and everything else. It's just
sure.
insane the kind of money that we're spending, and many Southern Baptists are continually frustrated that we have $80+ million budget that's a budget line in church planting at the North American Mission Board, and nobody knows how the money's spent. We don't know if it's being spent on, 1099 contractors that are doing certain kind of work. We don't know if it's
Right.
being spent on NAMB ambassadors, if it's buying, houses for church planters somewhere, or we just don't know. And those questions keep being asked, and the financial transparency is just not there at that point. Well, we're going to wrap it up. And in wrapping up, I want to ask you one question here, Steve. What advice would you give to pastors struggling with these same kind of concerns? I know you finally in your congregation prompted it, and you eventually left and, moved beyond the SBC. Many pastors, I talked to one just yesterday, that they're struggling with this, and this is coming up in this next year. He told me they're making a decision if they're going to stay, and it's not because they're leaving SBC. They feel like the SBC has left them as a orthodox, biblical Southern Baptist kind of a church at that point. So, what advice could you give to pastors who are struggling through this?
Well, I think remind yourself what you're called to do as a pastor. You're called to lead the body of Christ. You're called to lead. And so you have to lead with wisdom. And that wisdom sometimes may be going against the grain of what may look like as a norm. I think the other thing sometimes we do is, well, we just send it to the co-op and everything's good. Well, don't be afraid to ask questions, because when you got money that's supposed to be supporting certain things and you have no idea where it's going, you have every right to ask those questions, and you should get answers to where that funding is going. And obviously, through much prayer and seeking the Lord, you may have to make a decision, even though your church was rooted in SBC. If you don't see the change that needs to happen, you might need to step away and find another fellowship or tribe to hang out with. Listen, we were it. We were the ones that were leading more people to Christ in this country for years. So until we get back to the place that we look to the cross of Calvary and quit looking at money, it ain't going to change. So we need to get back to Jesus and what this is all about. And it's really not about some mansion over in somebody's backyard because we paid for it. It's about reaching people that are lost and dying and going to hell. And we're sitting here spending money on things that we shouldn't be. That every pastor has to make his own decision, but you're responsible for your congregation, and that's the one that God says you need to come to him on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that for sure. Steve, thank you for coming on and sharing with us your story and telling us a little bit about what has happened and your move. Sorry that you have left as far as somebody who's wanting to see our convention grow. But thank you for sharing with us your story and helping us understand better what your thought process was in that. Thank you.